This is a Momentum Media production.
The SMSF Adviser Show. Your expert insights into the biggest themes shaping the SMSF advice industry.
Hello and welcome to the SMSF Adviser Show. I'm your host, Keith Ford, and joining me as always is Aaron Dunn from Smarter SMSF. How are you doing, Aaron?
Not too bad, Keith. Thank you. Things have, I wouldn't say they've necessarily settled down from the official 1 July kickoff, but it's certainly settled down from that sort of initial bubble of new super funds being set up and all that sort of hype of activity that kicks off the new financial year.
Right. So a little bit less hectic, but still pretty busy.
Yeah. And it's interesting because we obviously see in our business a lot of the new fund setups and a lot of the documents that sort of are supported in that. And it certainly is a reflection that we are seeing plenty of activity still happening within the SMSF sector, which is what our SMSF Adviser Show is all about. So as we kick off today, let's have a bit of a chat about what's making news.
Right. Well, the first item on the agenda is mostly around the consultation closing around non-arm's length, which there's been a lot of calls for legislation to be repealed, most notably the joint address that was provided by the SMSF Association, Chartered Accountants Australia and New Zealand, CPA Australia, the Institute of Public Accountants, and the Tax Institute, which did a joint submission to Treasury, just not super happy with the changes.
Yeah, and this has been their position for some time when we think about this legislation, and I think I've said it on here plenty of times as well. This is the gift that keeps on giving. We go back to 2016, in essence. We have these changes that really took effect from July 18. But the genesis of this was what were originally these zero interest related party limited recourse borrowing arrangements. And they got nipped in the bud, way back then. And we saw compliance with the safe harbour provisions back in January of 2017. And then the ATO released their draft ruling in 2019, and that sort of shook things up. That created some problems that we then had to go back to government to try and get resolution on, which the then former Minister for Financial Services, Senator Jane Hume, did finally sort of listen to that and look to change. And we have an election, and then we wait a little bit more, and then we get some consultation and as an ongoing process in that whole journey, to some proposed legislation at the start of the year, to that not really suiting the narrative of the industry, certainly a long way from where consultation has sat, where the government always talks to the industry about, if you're coming to talk to us in a unified voice.
Right.
So this is a piece of legislation, and I kind of just went through the history, where there have been 13 or 14 professional bodies together, working together. And within that, there's been 4 of those bodies representing ongoing dialogue with the regulators and Treasury about this issue, reflecting accounting industry, SMSF industry, APRA-regulated funds, the legal fraternity, and so forth. And constantly there have been discussions about these particular issues and ways in which we could look at this. And ultimately, the big frustration that has come out of it, and this is certainly echoed in the feedback here, as was initially echoed in the feedback from the initial consultation, was that we now have a different set of rules for self-managed funds versus APRA funds when there are issues that are equally relevant to both sides of the coin. So we have a situation whereby we have a set of rules that now relate to self-managed funds. We have a 2x, 2 times factor approach to that. But in theory, if you're saying these issues don't exist for APRA funds, well, they don't actually really exist for self-managed super funds either. And we have other ways in which we can deal with this. And in the current form, if we don't address this appropriately, we might be thinking we're shutting one door, but we're blowing out a whole heap of windows in the back of the house at the same time. And that's really what these messages are trying to get through to Treasury, whether they're prepared to listen to that, given that we've kind of been talking about these for some period of time now. I guess we're just going to have to wait and see.
There is always that feeling that when a government changes, that you might have a better shot because they're not the government that perhaps brought legislation in. But I don't know whether that's actually something that is borne out in reality, I guess.
Yeah, and I think when you contemplate the SMSF sector, I think it would not be unreasonable for me to say that the coalition is going to have a much more favourable view of the SMSF sector compared to Labor. So it becomes a much harder case to argue when you're dealing with Treasury on issues that you're trying to defend the SMSF industry with the current government against the former government. So that's just the nature of the beast, but it does then present some pretty big challenges. And of course, one of the big bugbears is that we have a different set of rules that apply here for the non-arm's length expenditure rules, yet Treasury were not interested in setting different rules. In fact, just having a uniform set of rules when it comes to the $3 million additional earnings tax for members. So in the same budget, we ended up with two pieces of legislation being announced to impact the SMSF sector, and polar opposite approaches to that, I guess, again, just rubs the industry up the wrong way.
Right. A bit of kind of cognitive dissonance in the regulatory approach there,
absolutely.
Which I guess it does bring us to that idea that we are still kind of waiting to hear a final version of exactly how that's going to work, and indeed to get some kind of movement on the legislating the objective of super, which was also, expected soon, I guess.
The intention, of course, originally was that the objective of super was going to be the foundation stone for all policy going forward. And then we then saw the Labor government come out, and it was quite interesting because there was, at the SMSF National Conference earlier this year, we saw the Minister, Stephen Jones, get up and announce and talk about the importance of legislating the objective of super on the Friday. And we're like, oh, yeah, okay, this is quite interesting, foundational piece of work that will help direct policy. And then on the Monday, we then saw the Prime Minister and the Federal Treasurer come out and announce the $3 million issue. So there's a part of us that kind of says, well, it would have been much better if you actually had have announced all that stuff. You might not have got out of the conference if you had have announced that at that point in time. But the changes about this $3 million cap all come back to sustainability of tax concessions and fairness and equity and stuff, which all sit in and are underpinned by the objective of super. But they were trying to, I guess, the view was that they wanted to have this all wrapped up by budget. Yet here we are several months after, and we don't really know where they're heading with this at this point in time, which at this stage you start to get the feeling that the $3 million cap is the bit that's leading, they're leading with the chin with the $3 million cap stuff rather than leading with the chin from the objective stuff. In particular, it feels that way when you think about it in an SMSF context anyway.
Yeah, a little bit of a cart before the horse type situation, kind of putting one piece of legislation out before you've got this kind of foundational piece, which, yeah, and it's kind of an interesting way of doing it. And it's also, as you mentioned, the dragging out. It seems like every part of purported legislation that's going to come in, it does feel like it's all been a very slow roll. It's happened with things, other parts for advisors, like with the quality of advice review, where it took a long time for the government's response to come out. And it does feel like a bit of a pattern where everything's taking a long time to happen.
Yeah, and I think from Labor's point of view, they are riding on the coattails of a lot of this wasn't our legislation. So we want to try and understand this so the QAR is a perfect example, right? Because they say, well, this is not legislation that we were doing. We're happy to consider it, but we now want to undertake further review because of, X, Y, and Z. So they're latching on to that a little bit. I think from a policy point of view, quite clearly that objective of super is something that has been around. I mean, we're going back to 2016 and even 2013 in the Financial Systems Inquiry where it was originally recommended. It's these foundational pieces of work. Yes, they've got to get right, but you'd think a lot of the heavy lifting's been done through multiple reviews and therefore, get that certainty that we need for a lot of these potential issues. Treasury had previously indicated with the $3 million cap stuff that, we will see legislation obviously well before the start date of this law. So if we think about the tax cut changes that the former coalition government implemented and the phase 3 has really only come into play now, it's that sort of change that's being made with these $3 million cap issues. So even if the government did change in the next election, there would be a requirement for the coalition government to have to repeal those laws because they intend on getting those enshrined into the income tax and SIS laws well before the start date on 1 July 2025.
Yeah. And now to change track a little bit here, there's been a lot of scam warnings around SMSFs that the ATO's released recently. We had one about a property investment scheme, which was confusing to me a little bit. And I know you're going to explain it a lot better than I possibly could. But there was also, scams around illegal early release and tax avoidance schemes and all sorts just targeting SMSFs. What can you kind of tell us about these?
Yeah, so I guess let's talk about it generically first, where the ATO each year really does a great job in providing guidance on areas of concern. So they're seeing all ends of the spectrum when it comes to non-compliance. And when you think about the regulator, that is their role. Their role is to not really focus on the 98% that do it and do it really well, which is why in government reviews, the SMSF sector quite regularly gets referenced as a well-functioning industry, right? So the ATO's role is to really look at that 2% and pick those apart and work out where these problems are eventuating from. And quite clearly, things like scams and people coming into the sector through no fault of their own. They've gone in and thinking they're doing the right thing and potentially they've gone in under the pretense of something that ultimately is not what it seems. So the one that has really been raised in recent times by the ATO is around first home buyers that are wanting to enter the property market. And then through this establishment of a self-managed super fund, in essence, a scheme, they're ending up with the access to the money. And there's a whole heap of structures to try and achieve that, which in essence, the ATO is going, we will look straight through those and basically get a samurai and just go right through the middle of it. This is a scam, and therefore it will be illegal early access to that money. Now, along the way, there are a range of people who have naturally clipped the ticket and clipped the ticket quite extensively, and therefore the ATO is seriously looking at the promoter activity that sits around that, let alone the trustee behaviours that might be there as well. And quite clearly, ASIC has a role to play in these as well, because when we think about the recommendation to set up a self-managed super fund, that currently sits within the financial product recommendation framework. And therefore, if you don't have a license, then expect the full force of the law to come from ASIC as well. So, so there's always a range of areas that the ATO like to highlight. And I think the old adage is true. If it is too good to be true, then it probably is.
I think that's very fair. And I mean, SMSFs are not they're not a simple area. They're quite complex. There's a lot of rules. And so, and if there's any of these schemes, and scheme is just such a warning light when you hear that word, even though there's many legitimate uses of the word scheme, but it always sounds dodgy. But whenever there's these, if it's looking too easy, it's likely not going to be beneficial.
Yeah, and I think in many respects, it's somewhat of a privilege to be able to run your own superannuation. I mean, we sit in a country that has a unique retirement product that not many other countries have, and those that do have a custody arrangement that sit over the top of them. So the government needs to play a very strong role in the prudential regulation and enforcement of these arrangements, and so therefore we are, given the quantums of money, we are going to see people quite actively and aggressively target this area. And therefore, as professionals and then as regulators, we need to make sure that people are in it for the right reasons.
Absolutely. All right. So we're going to take a quick break. And then when we come back, we'll hear an interview with Boobalan Madhavan, who is from AccSource, who's going to talk everything outsourcing. Welcome back. We're joined now by Boobalan Madhavan, who is the Managing Director of AccSource, which is a business process outsourcing partner for accounting, compliance, operational, and administrative processes. Welcome to the podcast, Boobalan.
Thank you, Keith, for having me in your podcast. I really appreciate that.
No, not a problem. We're going to be talking about outsourcing today. and how that works for the SMSF advisor industry. To kick things off, I wanted to first ask you, what problems within the industry does outsourcing provide a strategic solution for?
In today's scenario, the talent pool is one of the significant challenges that's faced by any industry. And accounting industry, in fact, all the more it's facing the talent pool problem. And it's not just an SMSF industry issue. It is whole industry is facing this issue, and even the globe is facing the issue. So if we have to look at it, the outsourcing as a strategic solution for the current problems, I would list talent pool as number one problem. The second is capacity building. Now, you already have a shortage of talent pools, then how would you build the capacity? So when you have outsourcing as a strategic solution, it's easy for you to build capacity without the hassles of building the required infrastructure. Now, then we look at about value add services. Now we're talking about talent pool, capacity building. Now, if you don't have the capacity because of the talent pool constraints, then you can't think about any value add services. But with the right set of outsourcing partner in place, you can use the outsourcing solution to take care of your day-to-day routine, the activities that may not bring in significant value addition to your clients. And because you have an outsourcing provider who can make you to work on your business rather than in the business, which means you have more bandwidth and you can use that bandwidth to deliver high value add services. Then the scaling up, the fourth important point that I would look at it from an outsourcing perspective is that it's always going to help you in scaling up your business because you are not now constrained by the talent pool. You can build your capacity very easily, which means those are the two important components in scaling up any business. Now, the last thing that I would highlight from an outsourcing perspective is improving the bottom line. So if I have to summarize to your question, Keith, number one problem that can be solved by outsourcing as a strategy is talent pool. Number two is capacity building. Number three, it helps you in bringing in value add services into your business. It helps you in scaling up. And finally, it helps you to improve the bottom line.
Right. So always important there, improving the bottom line.
Absolutely. Any business in today's world, dynamics have changed in the last 20 odd years, Keith. So, always staying competitive, staying abreast with the technology, bringing in efficiencies, everything is a must to keep a tap on your bottom line.
So when you're working with outsourcing, how can you essentially strategize and communicate to your team to get buy-in? So should it be a consultative process to ensure that basically your on-site team doesn't feel insecure?
If I've understood your question clearly, your question has three parts. One, we are talking about outsourcing as a strategy. And then we are talking about how should it be communicated to the team. And third part is that the complete buy-in. And all three parts are very, very, very critical parts in evaluating and implementing outsourcing as a strategic solution. Let's address the first part, which is how outsourcing can be strategized. Now, it has four parts in it in strategizing and outsourcing, or a good outsourcing strategy has four parts in it. The first one we need to address is why outsourcing. Why the business wanted to outsource? Is it a matter of capacity building? Is it a matter of cost savings? Or the business wants to have access to global talent? So first, the business needs to address in a strategy is that why outsourcing? The next part in a strategy is that what is the short-term and the long-term goals and objectives? For example, Keith, many of the times I have experienced clients, they only look at outsourcing as a short-term objective, nothing wrong about it. Say, for example, they would adopt outsourcing only when they have a intermediary issues, such as like one of the team members taking a maternity break. So they're very clear that for us, outsourcing is a short-term goal. So which means the strategy clearly articulates what their objectives are. Then the third part in a strategy is what to outsource. Very, very, very important. As a business, the business should know what functions they wanted to outsource. Some businesses may say that I would only wanted to outsource the periodical reconciliations of SMSF on a day-to-day basis. So you need to be very clear what functional skill sets, what functions of the business you wanted to outsource. Then the fourth part is once again very important. Understand the strategy should address what are the risks in implementing an outsourcing solution and how those risks can be mitigated. And the last component of a good outsourcing strategy is the budget. Have a clear budget for your outsourcing so that it does not come to you in terms of cost surprises. That's how I would look at it from a good strategy perspective. Now, the second part of the question that you wanted to address is a complete buy-in. Keith, most of the times, one of the biggest pitfall of outsourcing or failure of outsourcing is the team is not kind of having a complete buy-in. In fact, some of the time outsourcing is being looked at, is that going to take away the jobs? So which means a complete buy-in from the whole team is a must and is considered to be one of the big practices. And I also want to add this, Keith. Today, we live in a world of social revolution. Businesses have seen industry revolution, from industry revolution to information revolution, and we live in a concept called social revolution where everything is about quality of life, which means it requires all the more that any business has a collaborative approach with the team, and that's the only way a successful business can be built. From that perspective, a complete buy-in from the team is required in evaluating and implementing an outsourcing solution. Now, how can this be achieved? First, an effective communication is very critical in communicating the outsourcing strategy to the team. Now, once an effective communication has happened, that should also encompass a clear definition of roles and responsibilities, how the team is going to see a change on their roles and responsibilities in an outsourcing scenario. And a lot of times, we have seen our clients have kind of positioned in such a way that it is resulting in a career growth. A simple example is that if you have a senior SMSF accountant who has always been kind of processing the SMSF financial statements and tax returns, doing a compliance work. Now, in an outsourcing scenario, you give them a team and then you are moving them up the ladder in the value chain whereby they were doing an individual contributory role, but now they have become a manager and managing an offshore team, which means there is a shift in the value chain. They are moving from an individual contributory role to a managerial role, whereby they can manage a set of team members, at the same time manage a set of clients, stay close to the clients, and elevate themselves. Is that not resulting in a career growth? And then in terms of communication, also communicate the operating structure, how the onshore team and offshore team are fitting into the overall organization structure. And finally, highlight the efficiencies and the advantages that business can get out of an outsourcing engagement.
I think that point about making the employees that you've got kind of onshore having that extra contributory role is really quite interesting, and certainly would help make the team feel more part of that process.
Absolutely, Keith. And I would want to just highlight one point there. When accounting industry, SMSF industry was kind of evaluating outsourcing maybe a decade back, job insecurity used to be one of the significant bottleneck in terms of embracing outsourcing. But today, over the last 10 years, outsourcing has become an industry norm. And in today's world, the pursued so-called job insecurity is not at all there in the industry when it comes to outsourcing.
Absolutely. All right. So wanted to ask you about industry insights, which obviously are very important, but I kind of wanted to ask you about how you drill down into the key insights that make outsourcing engagements effective.
In terms of drilling down into industry insights, there are many components in terms of understanding outsourcing solutions, getting into the industry insights, but I've just kind of listed 5 bullet points which are very, very critical in evaluating and implementing an outsourcing solution. The number one being business case. It's always imperative and critical for anyone to understand what business functions are best suited to outsource. Even if you get into the history of outsourcing, the concept which came because of information technology, they started with very process-oriented activities. Say, for example, payroll. So which means there has to be a business case. So you need to understand what business functions are best suited in terms of outsourcing. Then the second thing, the industry norm. Understanding the industry norm and identifying what type of work can be outsourced within the industry. For example, if we are talking about SMSF, it's imperative for us to understand what is the industry norm. What is the need for the industry to embrace outsourcing? Within the industry, what sort of activities are being outsourced? So that's very important. Then the third component from an industry insights is that what are the industry specific risks and how are these risks are being mitigated? The fourth component is geographical and economical factors. Very, very, very important from an outsourcing perspective. When you are going to a particular foreign country, you need to understand the availability of talent pool in that country, what kind of economic and political factors needs to be considered, what are the cultural and timing differences, and how are they going to impact in terms of outsourcing engagement. Then the fifth one is the engagement models. Now, outsourcing is such a concept, and that for each of the industry, the models can be completely different. So understanding and getting good insights on the engagement models is also very imperative in terms of getting good insights about the outsourcing industry.
Right. And so in terms of structure for outsourcing, what would you say constitutes an effective outsourcing structure?
The first one being the offshoring solution, the offshoring team and the onshore team, they should be integrated, and that integration should happen at the organization's overall structure. So integrating both offshore team and onshore team constitutes an effective outsourcing structure. Then the roles and responsibilities, defining the roles and responsibilities of the offshore team and the onshore team in terms of service delivery, that becomes an effective outsourcing structure. Then the process, mapping the process between the offshore and onshore is very critical in terms of service delivery. So offshore team should know exactly where to start and where to end. And in a similar fashion, the onshore team should know where to start and where to end. And there will be areas of overlapping, and that has to be clearly mapped out in the process map. Then the project champion. Having a project champion is one of the best practices, and it paves the way for the success of outsourcing relationship. It's like anything. If you have someone responsible for the onshore team as well as for the offshore team to implement an effective outsourcing solution, that project champion is the one who is going to determine the success of any outsourcing relationship. Then establishing communication channels. We all say that anything can be resolved with an appropriate communication, and outsourcing is no exception to that. If we have an effective communication channel and structure, the outsourcing solution can be implemented effectively. Then the last one is the feedback mechanism. Now, it's a kind of a strategy, it's kind of a solution, and we are talking about integration, roles and responsibilities, processes, project champion. So we are doing everything in the right way, but there has to be a mechanism to in a timely manner to measure the progress of the project. And if there are any constructive, objective feedbacks, that has to be taken on board, and the processes and procedures has to be refined to address those feedbacks. And this is not kind of a one-time activity. This has to be on an ongoing basis, because outsourcing is not kind of a set and forget solution. So that's how I would look at it in terms of the components of an effective outsourcing structure.
Yeah. And obviously, that communication, that's a really great point, especially because often you'll be working across time zones, and you've got to really make sure your processes, your structure, your communication is all nailed down for stuff like that.
Absolutely, Keith. In fact, if someone asked me to put me what is the number one pitfall in terms of any outsourcing relationship, I would put communication as number one. Yeah. And I have seen businesses, SMSF administration platforms, financial planners, they have been very, very successful in terms of outsourcing engagements. It's purely because of communication. I'm not even putting processes and process maps as number one. I'm putting, because how much ever you put the process maps, etc., if you don't have the communication channels, then obviously, which means there are going to be issues.
Absolutely. So we've got the structure out of the way now. How do you choose the right outsourcing solution provider for your business?
Good question, Keith. And I always say that start with engaging with a couple of outsourcing solution providers. If you have to choose the right provider for your business, you need to engage with them, gain an understanding of their business, engagement models, understand how they price, and what exactly is the process involved in working with that particular outsourcing solution provider in implementing an outsourcing solution for your business. So first, you need to engage. Then understand the culture of the company. In today's world, the culture is the key. We spoke about social revolution. So get a feeler of the management of the company and what is the culture of the company. And sometimes you need to understand that, so that just you make an assessment whether there's going to be a cultural alignment, a value alignment between your business and the outsourcing solution provider. The technical expertise. Say, for example, AccSource, it's kind of an outsourcing platform founded by accountants for accountants. So which means look into the technical expertise. What kind of technical expertise the company has? What are their target markets? Whom do they service? So are they specializing for a particular industry, or they just kind of servicing everyone? That will kind of give you an idea on the technical expertise. Then technology, asking relevant questions. Workflow management softwares do they use? How do they control the process? Is it all Excel driven, or is it all software driven? The more the questions you ask in relation to technology, that will kind of give you an idea how abreast the outsourcing solution provider is in terms of technology. Then obviously you need to ask about the infrastructure considerations. Sometimes you have to travel to the outsourcing solution provider's country, have a look at their facility, and be satisfied that you are happy for your offshore team members to work in that kind of an environment. And the last one is word of mouth. Ask for references. If you know someone in your fraternity who is using that particular outsourcing solution provider, nothing like that, even otherwise, ask for references. There are also other few aspects that needs considerations, like pricing considerations, but just do not make the outsourcing decision purely on the absolute numbers. We spoke about a lot of other important factors, but pricing is also an important consideration. Then the last one is your contractual obligations. Understand if there is any lock-in periods or any additional cost in implementing outsourcing solution.
Right. And I have to imagine that security would probably be a pretty significant factor in outsourcing as well.
Keith, I can talk to you for next 45 minutes on the security. And that's what the experience I have gone through in the last 15 years since the time I started the outsourcing business. We spoke about number one consideration and number one best practice is setting the right communication channel. But what is the biggest block in evaluating and implementing outsourcing is security. So the number one factor that comes to our client's mind when they wanted to evaluate and implement an outsourcing solution, security is the number one consideration. Now, why security is being the number one consideration is because the increased number of cyber attacks that we see on a day-to-day basis, and that has created a kind of fear of unknowns. Especially we are talking about an industry like SMSF accounting industry, and it's not kind of a technology industry. So the sense of fear of unknowns is a big bottleneck. Now, how do we kind of really alleviate this fear of unknowns is to do a proper security due diligence. And only with the security due diligence, you can understand the components of security. What are the components? What are the risks? And how to mitigate the risk for each of the components. Now, when I say components of security, they are logical security, physical security, regulatory considerations. And today, for each of the components, you have tools to understand the risk and how to mitigate the risk. Say, for example, there's a product called Practice Protect. Now, with that, you can kind of control the access, what you want your offshore team members to see and what not to see. So there are various tools to mitigate the risk. And you can ask the outsourcing solution provider, what kind of certifications do they have? Are they ISO certified? And what kind of vulnerability penetration testing that they do? How often do they do? And what other similar certifications that they can provide, giving a sense of comfort on the data security. And the last one is a lot of times that I've experienced is that security is considered to be a one-time activity. The questions are always being asked at the beginning of the engagement, and then it's never looked upon on a periodical basis. Security is not a one-time activity. In fact, it is an ongoing trait of a good outsourcing provider. So always look for continuity of compliance.
Yeah, particularly with, as you mentioned, a lot of concern around cybersecurity at the moment.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So if we were looking at perhaps a business was looking to decide between going out on their own or hiring freelancers in another country, what kind of factors should they be taking into account?
Very interesting question, Keith. In fact, I would always start to address this question. If your business is not outsourcing, why would you want to set up your own offshore center in another country? That's where I would actually start to address your question. But anyway, I'll straight away get into your question. If you wanted to set up your own back office, it requires a very, very, very careful consideration. Otherwise, it can be a very, very, very costly affair. Now, the first and foremost consideration in setting up your own BPO is setup cost. You need to set up a legal entity and you will have to manage all the nuances that comes with the regulatory obligation in the country where you want to set up your back offices. Yes, in today's world, you have service providers who can help you with all those things, but everything is going to come to you at a cost. The second is scale and viability. In fact, the first and foremost consideration in setting up your own BPO is scale and viability. Now, if you are having a real good scale, yes, then you can look at it. But at a smaller level, if you're a small and medium business enterprises, setting up your own BPO neither makes a business viability nor even from a cost saving perspective. Maybe you are not going to reap the benefits of outsourcing what you would have reaped if you would have gone with a good outsourcing partner. Then comes the geographical and economic and political stability, which means if you're setting up your own BPO in another foreign country, you need to have a good understanding of the geography, their economical their economical factors, and the political stability. Then there are other considerations like what is the availability of talent pool. Say, for example, if you are looking for a technology-oriented resources, because today, even SMSF, you need people to understand the technology very well so that they can operate softwares like Class, BGL 360, etc. very efficiently. Then you need to see what countries are technologically advanced. Say, for example, India, even today, is one of the country which controls 67% of outsourcing needs of the globe. So
Big number.
It's a big number. And that's because India is still number 2 in terms of information technology next to US. Then lead time. If you're setting up your BPO, own BPO, the lead time, the gestation period is going to be humongous. It's going to take a longer period of time than usual. Then the transition management. Again, it could be a really a costly affair. So these are the aspects that you need to consider if you are intending to set up your own back office. Then I think, Keith, you also asked me about freelancing. Keith, freelancing comes with a big compromise on the best practices of outsourcing engagement. And I will just kind of conclude on freelancing, commenting that it's completely an individual dependent, a person dependent, and not a process dependent. Now, you want to adopt outsourcing as a strategy, and we discussed the components of a good outsourcing strategy. Now, if you are taking the path of freelancing, then you are compromising on all of the components of an outsourcing strategy.
Right. And so what I thought we might finish up with, we'll conclude after this question. What are the legal obligations that are involved in integrating an outsourcing solution?
First, the clients needs to be communicated. In our industry, the clients has to be communicated, and that's a legal obligation for any business that intends to use outsourcing. We don't have a choice. And quite often, businesses do not want to embrace outsourcing purely because of this unknown fear, how my clients are going to react. If I outsource, I have an obligation to communicate to them. And how should I do the communication? The industry is evolved, so it is a legal obligation. We need to communicate to the clients. The second part is the regulatory compliance. Say, for example, every business is governed by Australian privacy principles. So we need to be cognizant of the fact how the Australian privacy principles are going to be complied in an outsourcing scenario. Then have a proper service level agreement setting the terms and conditions of the outsourcing engagement, so that if at all there is any issue, there is any dispute, you can always go back and look at the service level agreement to safeguard both the business interest. And then insurance, always ask this question to the insurance service provider. Do they have sufficient insurance, in particular the cyber security insurance? And then there has to be adequate non-disclosure and confidentiality agreements. If we are able to kind of take care of these 5 components from a legal perspective, pretty much everything is covered from a legal standpoint of view.
Great stuff. Well, I want to firstly just thank you for coming on the show today, Boobalan. I think there was a lot of really great information in there.
Thank you so much, Keith. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. And I hope I have highlighted some of the issues and some of the best practices in terms of evaluating and implementing an outsourcing solution.
Well, yeah, I think you certainly did that. That was Boobalan Madhavan from AccSource. Have a good day.
Thanks, Keith. Thanks a lot.
And we're back here with Aaron again from Smarter SMSF, just to do a bit of a wrap up on what we spoke about this week. Aaron, what was the most interesting thing to come out of the news this week for you?
I think the fact that, Yeah, we're almost into our last real chance of providing feedback to government to get any sort of change on these non-arm's length expenses rules and how they impact the non-arm's length income provisions. And we've gone through consultation and continued to raise issues. And quite clearly, the government is now looking to legislate because these laws are to take effect from the 1st of July 2023. The ATO that has the relief in place at the moment is not going to extend it any further. So we need to, this is kind of the last bite of the cherry to get a change or not. And if we don't, then we have to kind of live with it and move on. So yeah, it'll be quite interesting to see to what extent we see Treasury listen to the feedback. And again, the joint approach is going to carry much more weight than doing that individually. So I guess we have our fingers crossed to see whether we see anything changed as a result of the final legislation and it getting introduced into Parliament.
Yeah. And, those multiple bodies putting in that joint submission, showing that really united front. I mean, from their perspective, you would hope that has some kind of an effect. It's who knows if that really will.
Yeah, it hasn't. I'll put it this way: it hasn't to date, and there'd been more parties involved. So I don't hold out much for it. But I guess from where we were to where we are, it's a better result from the draft to its current form. But it's not the outcome that the industry was after.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's everything that we've got for this week. I'll just send another reminder, as we did last week. You still have time to vote on the SMSF Adviser Awards for 2023. You just need to go to the website. You'll be able to find everything you need there. The voting is open until the 21st of July. Winners are going to be revealed, I believe, sometime in August. I'm not sure we've got an exact date for that, or someone probably does, but just not me. But closing 21st of July, get your votes in. It's a great initiative.
Absolutely, Keith. I cannot recommend it enough for all those providers out there that do a wonderful job in the SMSF industry. And if anyone has any suggestions for speakers and topics, how can they get in contact with us?
They can get to us at editor@smsfadvisoronline.com.au. Just hit us up with everything you've got.
Excellent. Well, thank you once again for joining us for this week's SMSF Adviser Show. I hope you have a great rest of the week. Take care and bye for now.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.